Welcome to AI FISEC Today, the physical security industry's first podcast dedicated to uncovering the mysteries and opportunities around AI. I'm your host, Don Marone, and I'm really excited for this episode's guest. Justin Stearns is the Vice President of Chimera Integrations and President of Alchemy Corp, where he focuses on bridging the gap between physical and cybersecurity. With over 20 years of experience in both technology, integration, and business development, Justin is passionate about leveraging AI and automation to drive organizational excellence. Now, let's dive into the conversation. Welcome to the podcast, Justin.
Thanks a lot, Dom. Super stoked to talk about this stuff.
I know. When we were planning this, I think the spin on AI, artificial intelligence into augmented intelligence is super relevant because I think that's a lot what AI is doing today is enhancing people's ability to do more with less. And hopefully we'll unpack some of that today through our conversation. But I figured, obviously, we gave an intro for you at the start of this video, but we go right into it, right? And talk about, the differences between augmentation versus automation. And so the first question I have for you is, so where do you draw the line between augmenting human decision making and replacing it entirely with AI? And why is this distinction crucial for the future of physical security?
Yeah, it's a really big deal. And I think that line has to get drawn kind of case by case because there's just so many lines that need to get drawn. And then we're only on the cusp, I think, of realizing how much AI can do for our industry. And with that realization, even just the things that you have mentioned, before we jumped on this call that have changed in the last 2 weeks that have just been a game changer in our approach toward the use of AI. So we're gonna have to continuously draw those lines. Kind of a side tangent as well. It's an interesting conversation that even like the Department of Homeland Security is having at very, very high levels. Everybody's thinking about that. Where do you draw the line, especially when you're talking about life safety, physical security, protecting assets, either from the perspective of Department of Defense, national security, or a local grocery store. So case by case, you got to draw, lethal force. Beta testing another AI gun detection system right now. And what I love about this one is it's slower than ones I've seen before. It's actually got a 30 to 40 second delay before you're notified about a weapon being exposed through a surveillance system, like to a camera. That's because it's got a third human verification before they send out the alert. So it involves a monitoring piece to it. So a gun is detected. You've got edge-based processing, which is really decent and getting better. But then it goes to the cloud and has cloud verification AI processing. And if it passes both of those two, it's determined there's a weapon. The third line of defense is that human intelligence, which I don't know if I'd be comfortable getting rid of that, at least anytime soon with what I've seen in the technology. So, that's one line. Where do you see the line?
Yeah, it sounds like what you're balancing is impact, like how high the impact is would distinguish when AI would make decision making. And I'm definitely in the same belief as a company that makes AI agents. I always tell customers, I think we maybe had this discussion before about the spectrum of different types of agents, but really like when agents make sense. So it's a repetitive tasks in this case. It's something that is high impact, but not so common, right? And in that spectrum, that is not a repetitive thing, and the impact is really high. That block, I have a human on that one all the time, pretty much, right? But the thing is, though, what is repetitive is that video, let's say a camera or that detection device has to look at a scenario all day, right? So even though that event only happens like once, let's say a day or whatever, hopefully never, but once a day, it's doing processing all day. So that is repetitive, but the decision is still high impact. So when it's high repetitive, which it is, and based on how I described it with the processing, and high impact, I always recommend human in the loop. So it doesn't make the decision without coming back to the operator, I guess in this case, whoever's using the security technology described in whatever vertical it is, and saying like, hey, what do you want me to do with this? Or, hey, I just want to let you know this is what's going on, and now it's up to the person to do it. But if it's low impact, then there's a place for AI to make some decisions. But what's interesting though is that AI makes like decisions along the way. So then the question becomes is like, what is the decision? And I think the decision, the closer it is to the high impact, the closer we get to requiring a human in the loop, right? Because there's all the processing that's doing when it's object detecting. Those are decisions. It's deciding or predicting what am I seeing, and it's making a decision what I'm seeing. but maybe at the point that it calls authorities or, performs a lockdown event because it sees a gun, you know, that's at least how I would see it, but would love your return feedback if you have any.
100%. I mean, anytime, and then the question is what's the action? Because you've got the trigger in AI,
Mm,
something. It's detecting human behavior, which is another interesting use case for object detection. But that's the trigger. What's the reaction? What's the action that the agent's going to take after that? And how far is it going to be taken? There's another system that we're beta testing right now. That's what I think is what going to be one of the most incredible surveillance tools with applications of AI. But it'll build the case for evidence, right? But AI should never alter or even have an opinion about what should or should not be involved in that evidence chain, right? So there's another line we have to consider. So this particular software that we're testing right now, I can say, hey, how many dogs are on my property in the last 30 days and build a case for each of those. Or I can say, how many people seem to enter an unauthorized area where there could be legal repercussions that I could follow up on. Give me everything. And then it's got to be a human at that point. And we're even seeing that in, I forget the name of the software now. It's used in interrogations for police stations. And there's a whole AI component that builds the case for you. But you have to be so careful and really, really draw the line and not take too much of the work out of the human element, because you can mess up a lot in there. And as much as I trust AI and live by AI, I'm staring at AI right now while I'm talking to you. You got to be careful when it comes to that high impact stuff like you're talking about.
Well, and by the way, I should have mentioned this as we started, but remember to do it in the intro video. I'm pretty sure you're the first security integrator that I've had on this channel, right? And why I think that's important to mention based on what you're saying is because you're in that layer of liability, right? Like you have to carry this insurance like manufacturers do, but manufacturers aren't implementing. And so the promise, the buck stops with you from the customer's perspective, right? A lot of times to say, what's the outcome I'm expecting and how do I use these systems, Justin? Like your team's going to teach me. They might not always bring in the manufacturers to do that. So like, where do you guys, when you're saying not trusting AI or maybe the AI, when you're using these systems, are you also like kind of coaching them? Because now it's like a new training. It's not just like, how do I use this access control system? It's like, how do I now not only set the expectations of how these AI systems are going to perform?
No, that's one of our questions as well. And such an important question is how do you build trust in that? And I think it's about setting the expectation. So another kind of interesting thing about being an integrator that is not only advocating for my customers to purchase AI backed technology, but obviously like you, we're an early adopter and using it in our own operations as well, and have been for years. So first of all, is we don't sell anything that we haven't fully tested, which is why we have testing labs in all 5 of our offices. If there's something that intrigues a particular manager or salesperson, great, love it, own it, test it, then the rest of us will test it. So we're early adopters, but kind of slow. There's got to be a catchy phrase I could put at the end of that: early adopters, but slow to sell it, I guess. But you have to set the expectation. So another use case, kind of customer facing from an integrator's perspective, at a manufacturing facility looking at something, 2 different surveillance systems, one that was very, very heavy AI, self-learning models. You can train in a lot of things, kind of classic, just full AI. The other one was more of a traditional rollout of analytics with an AI component, object detection, seemingly could do way less than the system that is just full-blown AI and what you would think of. I don't know how to better word that. But the thing is do you have an operator that's willing to own that? Make sure the model is training itself well enough, because most of the manufacturers are not going to sit there and train your cameras for you. Most of the integrators aren't going to sit there. And we offer that. If you'd like us to do it, great. Here's an extra monthly cost for a service agreement for us to sit there and hand train these models once they've learned your environment. But setting the expectation that if you don't put the time or money in, you're not going to get it back out. There are very, very few systems. There's a couple that we're testing that are pushing that limit. But when it comes to trust, you can't just set it and forget it. There is groundwork that has to be done. There's check-ins that have to be done. And you can either pay somebody else to do it or you can do it yourself, but you got to take ownership over that. What do you
Mhm.
think?
Yeah. Yeah. And I want to, I love the theme of this augmented intelligence because what it tells me is that humans are definitely still in the loop. There's a lot of attention on AI and not enough attention on people. And so what augmented intelligence does is it puts the two together and is as a force is And I love the reuse of the acronym. And so getting back to this human AI collaboration, there's a few things you did mention there, but I do want to get back to that where some examples, from your work where AI did significantly enhance performance of these security personnel rather than just replacing their job, right? So if you think about the things you've installed for them, you've you've provided them some AIs that with collaboration with the person has greatly enhanced their job but not replaced them. Do you have maybe an example or two you could provide?
Sure. I mean, there's kind of two sides to that coin when we look at, because it's a huge concern that a lot of people have is, well, who's going to have a job now that AI exists? Which I love this, the augmentation versus full automation or replacement. So from a security perspective, one, a lot of these budgets are dwindling and people are already losing their jobs. And AI is going in and helping companies just augment the lack of resources that they have, right? Like they need more resources and they can't get it. So for instance, one of these systems that we're beta testing now, I can just go in and search, show me every time a dog showed up on my camera, show me every time that somebody attempted to go into an unauthorized area, notify me about that and send an email to my safety team, right? But another really, really big component of this is now, whereas taking surveillance is one of the best use cases for AI right now in physical security, all of that came out of the security budget. With the use of AI, surveillance cameras can do so much more than just be another security widget for you. We're helping marketing teams with it, right? So now we're pulling from the marketing budget to install surveillance cameras. And I can't not smile about that because we're able to sell bigger systems for more money. And I don't say that with any fear that my customers will hear this, because if we're not solving problems that justify the expense, then they're not going to buy it anyways, right? We're not going to sell snake oil.
Mhm.
But the fact that I can get demographic information, line cues, some of the stuff that's happening, especially in AI as pertains to surveillance systems, incredible. And now takes that out of the security hands and now has value to the CRO, the COO, the CEO, CMO, and the CFO. That wasn't a thing before. It was always, really going back in time. It was a forensic tool to tell me how I got screwed. Now it's a proactive tool that can solve problems. And I like to think that what makes Chimera special is that we don't just, somebody calls and says they want a camera system, they want access control. That's great. We'll get to that.
Mhm.
What's your problem? What
Mhm.
is your goal of your organization? What are all the hurdles where you think they pertain to what I do or not that are in the way of you being successful? And now we have one more tool in the box times a million, which is AI, which we
Mhm.
can plug in a lot of different ways. And we take an untraditional approach toward using it. But it's to enhance things. I've never had a customer, we've been selling AI since as long as we could. We've never had a customer say, "Thank you so much. I can now fire 4 people because you sold us this agent."
Literally no one,
Right, even
except secretly the fortune companies are probably pretty pumped about it. But no, yeah, I get what you're saying. Yeah.
I mean, there certainly is some efficiencies of scale when you
Mhm.
really, really start looking at things. And yeah, jobs could get replaced, but they proved this with automation and manufacturing well before AI was even a thing, that for every job that was lost in automation, 2 more were gained in software and engineering. Right? Like it's a level up, and our education systems are starting to fall in line with it and realize that, the level of education, which was designed to get the masses working in factories or, in the masses of jobs, that landscape has changed. And my daughter in kindergarten was learning coding. Right. So I think those fears are important. We need to be mindful of them. Um, but they're not fully reality based when we look at the landscape of how this is rolled out. Certainly, there's been some use cases and some fear that's been proven around people losing jobs to AI. But even in Chimera ourselves, we've grown exponentially. We keep on hiring more people, and we give them all of the AI tools they could possibly ask for or want and teach them just to do their job even better.
Absolutely. And I think for the existing employees, I think that's the right way to look at it for sure. I mean, one of the things that has been crept up in the media was Shopify's CEO's recent comment about don't go hire people until you can tell me why AI can't do it. And so, understandably, there's some uproar about that. I get it, but at the same time, you can't blame them. If you can do it, they can try. Why not? They're just trying to be efficient. Any other business, it's no different than saying I want to go buy software that's already made for this low price of a subscription because maybe that can solve our problem versus doing it manually. There's no difference, I think,
The extreme. Why
than
don't I
that.
just go use an abacus then instead of a calculator?
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
we really
So
want
it's
files back, we'll figure it out.
yeah. And so, and I agree, like, with the position, because even though I own an AI company, I'm always like human first, right? Like, how do we make people better? And one of my philosophies is, I might have shared this with you before, is that when we get out of the repetitive and mundane, we have a better opportunity to be what people were probably built for. And I'll give you a quick example. I just talked to someone this morning about this. Like doctors and lawyers, their jobs didn't exist like 150 years ago, right? Accountants didn't exist, right? And that's a very small fraction of time, right? If humanity's been around for 300,000 years or something, and like single percent, like tiny amounts, has those things existed. And people can argue we're more advanced today than ever before, whatever. But with that being said, I think we will find creative ways to find new things. But instead of saying, oh, we're going to have AI do the accounting work, it's more of, hey, my staff that exists today, I want them to perform accounting tasks like as if I just doubled my team, because we're growing, because my company just grew 900%. Not everybody grows 900%, by the way, Justin.
It's a huge deal. I just hired a new staff accountant on Monday, implementing AI into what she's doing, and she's a seasoned vet with this. She's amazing, ton of experience. At least 30 years experience as an accountant, and now her accounting ability is on a whole new level. And I'll just speak from my own experience, right? So I am not traditionally taught pretty much in anything except for maybe piano. And I got out of traditional learning with that as soon as I could. Barely graduated high school. I went to summer school for math twice, but then CFO was one of my first roles in my 20s. This is pre-AI, I'm 38. So AI really wasn't a thing. The internet was barely a thing back then, at least out of my pocket. I dove into ChatGPT super early on, which is kind of your training wheels of AI. I've always refused to use Excel or learn Excel. I was like, no, that's what accountants are for. Bookkeepers, they're all doing great reports in there. Why do I need to use it? I didn't even know how to do a sum formula. A year and a half ago, I wrote my own software in Google Sheets, their version of Excel, through the use of ChatGPT. Wrote my own API integration from ChatGPT directly into the cell of a Google Sheet, which I didn't even know. I'm still not even sure what API stands for. It doesn't matter.
Application Programmable Interface.
Awesome.
Yeah.
This is why I'm not one of our engineers, by the way. So anybody watching this,
no problem.
Our Chimera,
over time that'll become less important.
I hate acronyms. What else have I done with it? That's just, I would have not been able to do, even just the way I communicate. One of my favorite use cases on our operations side for myself with AI now is just simply getting a transcription of my internal Google meetings. Right. And I've trained these specific models. So I've got my business mentor one that's modeled after a few people that I really look up to. I give it the transcription, and it knows every time I do this to give me all of the actionables, who's it's assigned to, the timeline, and then tell me what I could have done better as a leader to conduct this meeting the next time. And I've been doing that for about a year consistently. And then every time I did it, it was gold. My notes were better. I was more present in the meeting. I didn't have to worry about it. I mean, tons of people are using AI note takers. I don't typically just look for an AI output. I love just getting a transcription and putting it into my own model. But now fast forward a year, and I said, now look at a year's worth of my meetings. First with my admin team, then let's look at my sales team, my executive meetings. Where am I failing as a leader? And then the feedback was so candid and so true. I could ask other people on the team, and they certainly have given me their opinion on why I'm not always the most fun to work with. But that kind of unbelievable look back in a mirror with an AI agent based off of the best business people I know in the world. Like, come on, that's just exciting. And now because of that, we're creating, I can directly attribute the fact that we've created more jobs to my use in AI, because it's made me a better leader, a better business owner or partner, whatever. I'm better at what I do because of it, and we've created more jobs there because of it as well.
I love it. I love it. That definitely aligns with some thinking I've shared on social, where it's like to self-reflect is to self-correct. And when you have these tools that enable you to self-reflect, that's the only way you get better. I mean, I tell my wife all the time, like when in life, and this is getting a little sidetracked, I want to come back to some of the, and I'm doing that sidetracking, not you. We'll get back to AI segment around security. And I want to start with trust in AI systems as that next question. But what happens is like at some point in my life, when you've read like extreme ownership, probably ever heard of it, yeah. So the idea there is that like for me, as a principal rule, I try to take accountability in everything that happens in my life. Even if I'm not to blame, I'll try to be like, well, Don, you could have said it differently, or maybe. And what happens, not all the time, because it turns into that's abusive, self abuse if you do that too much, but it's just more like when it's definitely appropriate, when it's like saying, and what happens is with that self correction, with that self awareness, you're able to get better, like you did with that example. You already use AI for all, and all intents and purposes, you were just able to self reflect in a really efficient way to compound your value as a leader over time that other people don't want to get to because they're too arrogant and stubborn to take that time to self-reflect. And especially as you probably used recently, maybe this is where it came from with the memory enhancements from ChatGPT. I literally just talked about someone about this morning, like the movie Her, where it turns into like your companion. And that's the way Microsoft's trying to sell it. Meta's doing the same thing. Grok will do the same thing. The big money is in business automation. There's big money, but the real scale money is to sell the ultimate personal companion for consumers, meaning like, because that thing will feed you, it'll be your influence in life, and it's going to know more. I told my wife years ago before I got into AI, I was like, if your phone could talk, it probably knows you better than you. Because think about how often you're around surfing information, whatever you're looking at, and this phone can tell you a lot. So one of the things that people have been doing in ChatGPT with the memory enhancements is they'll go in and they'll say, "Hey, ChatGPT, look at all of my history and roast me."
Yeah, I've done this. It's been amazing.
Did you?
The first time I did it, it was great. The second time I did it was as good. There was another one too. It was like knowing everything you know about me. Write a letter to me from God.
Oh, that's a good one.
I cried.
Yeah,
I cried like a little baby.
man.
And just to
Yeah.
advocate for what you're saying, I mean,
Wow.
I take notes now in my Chat GPT account. There's no reason for me to take notes anywhere else because of the memory enhancement. And I can pull back on it. I've got my personal budgeting one. I've got, and you still will get into the risks of it, right? You got to be careful with what information you're putting in there, and especially if it's other people's information. And it does have a lot of limitations, and it does make a lot of mistakes, especially when we're just talking about Chat GPT, especially out of the box. Have you seen the movie Limitless? This was one of my favorite movies.
I
I
love that
love
movie. I wish those pills were real, man.
they
I
are.
would have taken them.
It's
It's called
you know,
Adderall.
well, that too. But yeah,
Yeah.
Adderall, intelligence. For people that don't know, you take this pill and it unlocks, the rest of the 90% of your brain that you're not using. And in the movie, what I like about it is they show this just total dumbass, excuse my French, takes it and he comes up with some really dumbass ideas. And then somebody who's really, really intelligent takes it and they take it a lot further. I don't put anybody down for any of their use of AI, but good data in, good data out. If you just ask it to blatantly do something for you, you're going to get a really terrible response. And we all started there. That was like the beginning. But when you learn how to ask it to ask you questions and that self reflection piece comes in, that's where I've really noticed a huge level up. And just to back up, you're talking about when reflection can turn into abuse. Extreme Ownership is one of my favorite movies, and is Own It is our first core value in Chimera integrations. Good, bad, or indifferent, own what you do. It doesn't matter, right? But just to back up on that, self-reflection without mindfulness is where it becomes abusive. Self-reflection with mindfulness and understanding the intent to just grow, and that you're accountable for everything. Maybe I didn't tell you to punch me in the face, right? I'm not accountable for your fist necessarily hitting my face, but I'm accountable for whatever happens here on after. And that's where I think they draw that line in the book. Owning it and extreme ownership with your use of AI is the same thing. You got to own it or not, but you'll get it. You'll get out of it what you put into it.
I love it. I love it. So let's go back to trust, and we're going to talk about security again, right? So, and this is a different take on the question, but you sell customer some AI security system. They get a demo of it. The demos, right? We talked a little bit about this before, right? One, the regular demo of a security system is like, oh, these are the tools that you can use, and you can click the buttons or whatever. You can decide what happens. Okay. The other side is like, okay, now you're going to buy this AI, whatever camera system that's going to do these magical things and all this stuff. Is there any part of that where you have to play into the trust to bridge the gap of trust for that customer to accept that? Or is it really the manufacturer just spitting out their statistics to say, oh, we have a success rate of this? Are you having to play in that trust
I see.
gap for them to really use these systems to their maximum?
Let me make sure I understand the question right. So you're saying when I'm proposing something to the customer, that's the trust you're talking about that I have to build, or do I just hand over stats? I mean,
Yeah. Are you doing anything else other than like handing over stats from the manufacturer when you sell these security systems,
one,
AI security systems?
much like I'm sure you try to do on this podcast, you try to say somewhat brand agnostic. One of the most important things for Chimera is that we are brand agnostic when we're meeting with the customer. First and foremost, as a general rule, our first meeting with any customer is a problem meeting, and then it's our follow-up meeting where we even consider bringing up solutions, but never the other way around. What I find is that we know a lot of integrators, we're friends with a lot of them, is that some of these companies are going in with a solution first instead of the problem first, right? My point to that is that in identifying the problems, we 100% need to prove to the customer, especially with some of the things that we're asking for financially, that they can trust this. Brand equity is a big deal in ourselves. We've got a good brand, and I like to think that we haven't let very many of our customers down. And we certainly haven't lost a lot of customers, and testimonials are great there too. I actually never, just to answer it directly too, never really rely on manufacturer stats at all. If we're talking a huge leap in technology, maybe going from coax, right, to AI, if we're talking surveillance, and just to pick on surveillance because it's the easiest with AI, I'm going to do a demo for sure. But even if it's a small job, let's say it's a $3,000 two camera, parts only, they're going to self-install this. We demo in our own offices every single time what it is we're proposing and try to prove it, beyond a shadow of a doubt. So we do a lot of video proposals every time. Some
Oh, that's
engineers
cool.
don't like it as much, but I do a video demo proposal for every single estimate I put out. So first, what I'm going to do is recap what we talked about, identify your problems. And this is like marketing 101, right? Identify the problem, solve the problem. So identify the problem, solve the problem, but then show the proof in the pudding, like show why it's going to work in their facility. And then we'll talk about the numbers and explain too that this is just one solution of 1,000 in our toolbox. If you don't like it, if you want another 10 ideas, we'll give you another 10 ideas. But I don't want the customer to have to guess whether or not it's going to work or have any confusion, especially since we're really on the cutting edge of what we're doing. A lot of them just have no idea what I'm even talking about. So whether they trust me or not, I just assume that they don't. And I'm going to give them a full blown demo to make sure that they understand what they're buying into. There's subscription costs with a lot of these systems is a new thing. You came from a cloud-based company before who kind of paved the way for that. But most people are used to $25 a month, $40 a month for fire alarm monitoring, $90,000 a year in camera subscriptions, as well as a big capex, right? But trust has to be established there. And I just always assume that they're not going to trust me when I give them a proposal and make sure they understand it.
Right. And I like that transparency too. I mean, I mean, obviously there's a play for manufacturers to get involved to help and assist. They're going to say like, look what I'm buying is from this brand that look at all the companies that they serve, right? This is like any other normal product purchase, you know,
It's
but
different
like
though.
we said earlier, yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
But oh no, you're good, man. No, but like we said earlier, right? Like the integrator is a part of that promise. And I know too, I know how it goes. Like when you look at the manufacturer specs, like I remember wireless locks were notorious about the specs were X, and the reality was not that because of the environment. Environmental conditions were different. So through trial and error, people learn what the real specs are based on their experience. They could say, "Hey, manufacturer says this," but what we've seen is in reality is that. I've as an AI agency, I've seen a little bit of that. It's still pretty new, but you've had manufacturers like Microsoft that can promise the world, and they have amazing marketing, but they're not quite there. I'll give you an example. Like they have a voice AI capabilities within their agent building platform, and that one is very, very new. It doesn't sound natural. There's a lot of latency. So basically, there's reasons not to use it. You could use it, but it's not great, you know? And so they don't tell you that though. They tell you, hey, we have a voice AI capability built within some of our tool set. But as a practitioner, when you use it, you're like, well, I mean, if I'm going to talk to an AI, like I would want it to like sound as real as possible. I mean, ideally it would still solve the problem, like even calling to customer service. And we might have talked about this before, but calling in a customer service, how much do I care if I'm talking to a human? I don't know. I think that's different for each person. What I do care about is I called in for a specific issue, right? It depends on what it is, obviously. Like if I called in because I had an issue, something for my, I don't know, with my lawn service, and I just want to report this issue happened. But if I had a person to talk to about it, but then they went through like their normal steps and they weren't listening to me, as opposed to AI, that as soon as I talk, it will always stop talking and take in information from me, can be always consistently empathetic with me. Again, for lower impact things, I think I'd be okay with that, right? Because I've seen some of the voice AI and they sound very real. They've got some, I think they've obviously got some ways to go. And I think that's why there's a balance, right? It depends with some of these things on whether or not they're going to actually get put out in scale, or what level of impact they're going to bring. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I think it'll be interesting to watch that. Is it okay if I share my screen? We didn't really talk about that ahead of time. Can I show you something?
Yeah, go for it. Yeah. It'll be the first time on the podcast, but yeah, sure. Let's go for it.
We haven't, you can search the page, or you can go to the page. You can't search the page on our website. We did just put out our first kind of customer service AI agent in the form of a chatbot here for troubleshooting some of our most common questions.
Mm-hmm.
I personally, at this point, I don't think I'd ever consider a voice AI to answer the phones. One of the most important things at Chimera is that while we're certainly growing exponentially, we always want it to be a family business. We always want it to be friendly, inviting. And no matter how good the AI model is and how empathetic it is, I think that's another thing you just can't replace, is that human connection. I mean, you're talking to a guy who speaks to his AI every night, like a partner, but it's interesting. Like, that's another one of those lines that everybody's going to have to kind of draw for themselves. Like for Verizon, does it make sense for me to answer, have the language model pick up what I'm saying? And yeah, they're serving, I don't even know how many people a day. But for a technical support assistant, I think it's really interesting, and I think it's a great use case. They can answer the question efficiently. Let's see how it does. You got a question for it? What's a troubleshooting question the customer might have?
Can I ask about products?
Yeah.
Let's say I don't know how to do a Brevo door unlock schedule. Give me step-by-step instructions on how to do that.
I'm really curious. This is anxiety provoking to be performing live, but not. And if this fails epically, it's our director of customer success's fault. It's Sadie Styles. Access the web application, navigate to the access control section. Seems pretty accurate to me. And it sends you links to Brevo's website and a YouTube video on how to do it. Like, that's awesome.
So it's a retrieval agent, but now does it make a service ticket? So let's say like I have an issue. Can I talk to a live manager, then it posts it over to a live manager?
Yep. So every time somebody communicates with it, it sends out a note to our customer success team. They filter it and decide if somebody does need a response. Yeah, support.
So there's a human backend that looks at each message as they come through.
Augmentation, not full automation. And even if you are doing
Right.
full automation, and I've been automating for years, you need to back it up with human check-in. So there's all of our offices. Yeah, awesome.
Yeah, so we would call that, if you need support, yeah, I would call that a retrieval-based agent on the spectrum of agents. So you got retrieval, task, and then autonomous. Autonomous needs no human input. So an example of that, if that was autonomous, it would say take input, triage the issue completely, basically, until they either say live agent or manager or some fallback term, and then would push them into that direction. But then at the same time would make a service ticket, would then prioritize where it needs to go. So if you were a manufacturer, I'm doing one right now, quote for one right now, of that, based on that service ticket that comes in or what the issue is, it will route it to the appropriate dev team. So it will go into the ticketing system, but from there, it'll then route itself to whatever team needs to get it next, as opposed to this operator in the middle deciding where it needs to go.
So
That would be
this
like an autonomous version, for
this
example.
is probably more of a commercial for you, but this is where another really important line is drawn, and that we're constantly drawing at Chimera and our other ventures is I'm pretty well versed in at least the applications and use of AI. We use automation tools like Zapier, a whole bunch of them to tie all these things together, especially since it's been so new. And then agencies like yours are even newer and only now worth relevancy, in my opinion, because AI is finally at that level. We got our training wheels on. This is a training wheels technical support assistant. This is the importance of bringing in somebody like you to take it to that next level and really, really problem solve with these skills. I can do a lot with AI. Not only do I not have the time to fully dive into it and just live it like you do, because I have a business to run, I can only take it so far and I don't know what I don't know, no matter how much AI I've got telling me that. And I love your applications and your vision for it. Right now, you're working on another one of our biggest bottlenecks is engineering. And where do we're having internal dialogue is you've built this path for us of building and automating our engineering team. But do we allow the AI agent to decide which system is best for the customer based on the problems we've identified? Do we just have a quote, a good, better, best for everybody, and then our engineers sift through it and edit it? And this is the next evolution of it. And again, where we're going to lean on your expertise to figure that out as we move forward. So
Yeah,
well said,
that's
too.
awesome. I did not pay Justin for that endorsement.
That's you.
But yeah, not yet. Bro, he pays me. He pays me. Yeah, no, I appreciate that, man. Yeah, I think, and you're spot on, right? Not everything is an absolute in this AI space. You decide your comfort level, and then these things can shape to be what you want, right? And that's the importance of custom, because what happens when it's not is that you kind of get stuck into a box, and not people. Not everybody's not ready for a box. Not only just a box of everything performs the same necessarily, but more of where are we at in that journey of acceptance. So I want to get back to something. So let's go into fast forward a little bit into some human limitations in the physical security operations, right? So this is like maybe some experience you've had with some end users. We could take it also from a your own business standpoint if you want to, but from a human limitation standpoint. So what are some common human limitations that you've seen or your team has seen in physical security operations that you've successfully addressed through this augmented intelligence, and maybe what new opportunities have emerged because of that?
Yeah, I mean, fatigue and tunnel vision, right? Even just looking at night shifts as a classic case in physical security.
Mm,
You've got to see, not only that, look at security guards, how like we dipped our toes in considering in the Chimera family, getting into like an armed guard service and it was a nice strategic partnership. And do we want to get into this? The liability insurance alone for armed guards is unbelievably insane.
I've heard that. Yeah.
The liability period is insane. My brother's an attorney. He's like, Justin, just run away immediately. Our business attorney said the same thing. He's like, please don't. Right. And less armed guards are, especially in rural areas, available, or even 24-hour guards. It's a hard position to fill. To have, we had originally like pixel changes notifying that there's possibly motion or a shadow or a squirrel. The obvious ones are just that for human limitations and just humans not being able to see everything all at once and process it all. It's just not possible. You've got a video wall that costs you $200,000, an employee that costs you $180,000 a year when you consider everything else, looking at this video wall. And yeah, it's going to pop up interesting things, but while that's popping up, something else happens. And a lot of manufacturers have done a great job mitigating that, right? And building cases and things to look back on. But you can only use your set of eyes in one direction at a time efficiently. AI is not limited by that. So that's been a game changer on that one. Did that answer your question, or did I just go off on a tangent?
Yeah, and I think that's been a lot of the general acceptance in the industry, right? Is that the human attention is pretty limited. I think now it's down to 8 seconds, which sounds oddly close to like these video reels. The video reels, I think, are like 30 seconds, but still, even through that, it's like if you're losing your attention, that's probably a good indication that you probably also can't watch a video wall.
Look at it from a marketing perspective. You've got
Okay.
two
Yeah.
seconds to grab somebody's attention using video on social media. And if you're
Hmm.
lucky enough within that 2 seconds to get their attention, you've got them for maybe another 15 to 30 seconds. And that number is getting shorter and
Hmm.
shorter. I watch my kids flip through TikTok. It's disgusting.
Hmm.
Uh,
Yeah, it's crazy, man.
so another good use case is we had a considered a warehousing facility for a company, and they've got hundreds of them across the United States. They had they had armed guards at all the gates. The guards check all the trucks going in, trucks going out. Well, one of the heist scenarios that they had was guy shows up, sticks a gun at the armed guard's head, gets in, hooks up to an 18-wheeler, jumps out with $3 million worth of product. Now they're down an agent or one of their guards who may or may not have gotten killed, as well as $3 million worth of product. It was actually unsafe to have a guard in that instance. So now they've got a guard still at the facility. We put a trailer out at the entrance of every single one of their yards that has two-way communication, has an AI component to it on their surveillance cameras, license plate recognition, a lot of other things. And now for way less money, this one guard can guard the entire property more safely, not only just for their human safety component, but also for their product and liability and loss as well. So it's another kind of staff augmentation, another place where it wasn't just AI, but surveillance, communication, access control, all working together to make the facility safer, the product not get stolen, and create a more efficient guard service.
Mm. I love it.
And we made a lot of subscriptions.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's a $90,000 a year kind of client, right? No, that's good, man. I appreciate that example because there are limitations with people, and I think that the industry has this wide acceptance of the tension's low, therefore AI can detect stuff that people can't. Okay, fine, but what's next? And then there will be more of these examples that will become widely adopted for operators. Like one that's coming up is alarm attending to alarms, right, or clearing alarms, right, nuisance alarms. So more and more, I'm seeing a lot of manufacturers come up with their agents that will help do that. And that's a nuisance. That's a repetitive thing, a little bit less workload than what a camera would do, as we talked about earlier in this session. But nonetheless, that, right? And these things start to shape people. And so one of the things that I've always, when these kind of topics show up in this podcast, for the end users that are listening, that are security operators, if there's anything you do in your job that is repetitive, don't go ahead and assume at some point that AI could at least take a stab at that and find out how. And I posted this actually, almost exact thing on LinkedIn, but find out where you can double down into your human traits, and a lot of that, like I've seen from leaders within loss prevention organizations, where one of the things that they do to reduce internal theft is they create like this positive culture. Because when I have my people that love where they work, they love what they do, it's like they're not going to steal from their family. Maybe some of them do, but you know what I mean? The point is like once they feel like they enjoy work and they're pumped about being there, but they have this leader that works with them, that's welcoming, that's just makes them a part of the team. That's an aspect that is human like, right? That is human only. And so that gets them back to doing that as opposed to looking at cameras across all the TJ Maxx's, across the country.
No, 100%. And have a fun family-like environment is our second core value. We'll get through all of them on this one talk. But another example just internally is we recently hired an accounting intern, to audit all of our subscriptions and all of our RMR, especially with growth. You're going to have mistakes, and it's complicated tracking those. I know there's distributors that have leaned on me for helping them figure out how to track their own subscriptions with other indicators. It's a difficult challenge, and it's an accounting challenge. It's an auditing challenge. But again, going back to that fear of augmentation instead of just replacing, instead of having somebody just auditing information, which is an accounting task, which still is an operations problem. Like, great, you can identify the problem in accounting. It doesn't fix it. Maybe it fixes the books, but then we still have an operations issue. So now instead of spending big dollars on calculating and accounting, we can put that money into operations and improvement. Right. So another place where AI can be very, very useful, and augmentation, and just a paradigm shift in kind of how we spend our resources, which are more and more limited. The cost of cash is getting more and more expensive. I mean, these tariffs are a huge scare in our industry right now and a huge problem. AI is another place where you can help that. The data validation, right? We're having the most extreme ups and downs on pricing changes we've ever seen in our admin teams. Like, how do we deal with this? How do we stay up to date? How does the engineering team stay up to date with it? Like, it's unbelievable. Well, great. Here's another place where very simply this constant calculating can be done through an AI agent, and now we can focus our resources on operations and implementation.
So in that, I'm just curious on that example, tariff happens, prices of goods go up by some percent that you can calculate. So therefore, you have to adjust your prices before you send the quote out, right? Because you're not going to adjust your customer's monthly rate every month. Maybe as the contract
Well,
renews,
the monthly
but
rates are
probably
changing because that's more
right.
subscription based on hardware based, and they're not.
But no, like maintenance is what I'm talking about because you've
Well,
got
and maintenance is a whole nother beast, but let's just talk about hardware cost alone.
yeah.
This is a convoluted enough problem. But this is where somebody, especially with your skills, can come in. We've got a database, and we've been using email automation for a long time for repetitive tasks. So an email comes in from a manufacturer to our AP department, and it says pricing change, and there's a couple keywords that are constantly being searched in our emails. It pulls that pricing change out, and this is where AI can really, really hone in on it. Okay, are they saying there's a pricing change? What does it affect? Take the pricing catalog, upload it to our pricing database, again, filter it, adjust the markup, go back to our CRM and our accounting software, and notify our engineers all in one fell swoop. Like, we just had a manufacturer give us a 7-day guarantee on price that we got quoted. That's insane. We've just never seen pricing so volatile, right? So how do we mitigate that? How do we stay alive? How do I not quote somebody 30% off my cost in 30 days by accident?
Wow. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a great question, right? Now post our call, I'm going to try to give some thought on that, right? Because everybody's got that problem right now that buys hardware that's being shipped in from the U.S. Everyone, not just
It's
security
always a
industry, but
problem. It's
probably
just a
everyone, right?
volatile one, right? Like, we always have to deal
hmm
with that. We make sure we're staying up to date on pricing changes.
mm
Most of them come out once a year. A lot of them is around the end of the first of the year, but not always. I mean, sometimes they come out randomly. So that data control, how do we stay on top of that really, really accurately? And I think, you designing that AI agent as soon as possible would be the answer for us.
Yeah. Yeah. And for sensitivity for the audience, I'm going to probably save my comments for sometime after the call because I had a lot of thoughts immediately on that, right? But that's not what we're here for. But I think that was great. I appreciate you mentioning that because this is the kind of stuff that I love to hear as an AI agency is like, what are the problems that people are going through? And I feel an immediate responsibility to figure out, like, how can I help? Assuming they want to pay for it, right? Because in this case, it's like, well, shoot, if we get the rate wrong, some point over time, as we continue to get it wrong, it would have paid for this agent build already. And even on one project, like, if you sell 50K project and you're getting 30 points, you expect, but then the tariff comes in, drops you down by 5, 30 points off of 50K, that's 15,000. Then you
We just got
take
a
5
30%.
points off that.
We just got a 30% increase overnight from one manufacturer.
What? That's
That's me.
crazy.
That's off my cost. So if I'm normally,
Man.
let's say I charge $100 for a product and I have a 50% margin, so I'm making $50 because I
Mm,
get a 50% discount off of what I'm selling to the customer. And now my price goes up 35% from there.
damn.
That's not
I
enough
didn't
to
realize it
live,
was that bad.
right? And some of them, we don't, I think most integrators would laugh to think they could get a 50% margin on most of their jobs. Like, that's just simple math. You could lose money immediately on a large project and be screwed.
But see, we would need that information from the manufacturer. Like basically, as soon as they have it, sweet, that needs to find because even if you get the tariff says, oh, it's going to go up. It's probably going to go up maybe in this category of product. But then how the manufacturer realizes that is, who knows? Maybe they're saying like it's like COVID. COVID came, so all of our prices went up by twice the amount. I'm like, did it, or are you just gouging us right now? We can't really argue that it went up by 30% because we don't know that somehow the tariff going up by 5% translates into the 30% because they may say, well, you know, whatever, right? It's hard to argue against that, especially when you have proposals already out for that product for the customer. The customer's already sold on that system. And then all of a sudden you had to come back to them and say, oh, and by the way, this
Yeah.
is what happened.
So that's what we're talking about currently. The last couple of weeks is data control, and again, it's a great use case for AI and integrating it into email filtering, and is a helpful way to do that. And some of our general inboxes, you can automate your service inbox, your AP inbox, your AR inbox, any of those general inboxes. It's great to have an agent looking at it with your team delegate it. No, there's a lot you can do there.
So interesting. Let's talk about the future, Justin. All right. So let's go into that. So the future of security work. So if we looked at 5 years ahead, how do you envision AI changing the role of these physical security professionals, and what human qualities do you think will remain as irreplaceable? What human qualities will remain
So that's
irreplaceable?
the question: is what are the human qualities that will remain in those pieces? That's a hard question.
Yeah. So as we look at our industry, right, how these AIs will shape our industry over the next 5 years, what do you think are the human qualities 5 years from now that will remain irreplaceable for the people in our industry? This is just security industry we're thinking about.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to drawing that line of the size of impact on the decision that's being made. To not answer your question at all, I think paperwork will be a thing of the past. Building the cases will be 99% of the thing of the past. There's still It's a really, really hard question because there's still, kind of that limitless pill, right? It's only as good as kind of the operator behind it, but it's getting really, really freaking good. So let's take a use case, for instance, because I can't answer your question. It's too hard. Let's talk about hospitals. It's an interesting pendulation between physical security and cybersecurity. We talked about how even just surveillance systems can do more than just security now. They can. I think it's not going to be long before satisfaction can be measured really, really easily with AI and surveillance and access control and a lot of other things. What human elements will stay? I think it. What do I do with this information that AI has given me? At the end of the day, okay, as integrations grow and we start tying together all of these disparate systems with all this crazy amount of metadata. I mean, metadata has been the talk for years and years, like on social media and user interfaces. And now we're going to have more of it than ever across all of these IoT devices and different systems. And AI is going to be able to tell you a lot about that and create connections, but somebody still has to make the decision as to what to do with that information. We're already losing some of that to AI. What will remain? Man, that's a really, really difficult question that I thought about before we got on the call. Empathy, escalation control, what skills can't a machine own? Like you even said, we can have a customer service agent that can be as empathetic and always listen and be interrupted whenever you want, as rudely as you want. That's great. But is it going to be capable of the level of empathy that truly humans are? What do you think? I got to push it back.
Yeah, so it's a great question. So when I think of customer support AI, I think it can crush any tier one thing, honestly, that humans can right now. Tier two is where, because it's the difference of today, if someone you use a great example of a bank or whoever you would call, or a Verizon. You call in, they got this call tree you got to go through. Like that sucks, man. Like going through, I mean, it's not great, right? They're going to get better. So what I'm saying is AI can replace that. So you're meaning they answer right away. They already see your number coming in. That's a part of the agentic capability, and they already have your account pulled up. And then they're asking you to verify, maybe. And once you're there, you're like, hey, Justin, how can I help you today? And they're like, and this agent could have access to tier one support data across customer service, tech support, whatever, right? And I can sell, right? I can take this person through the tracks from a high level standpoint. And what I suspect is going to happen is that as people use these AI companions like OpenAI, that I think will turn into their basically really high value personal assistant, is that they will get used to talking to them. And so I think at that tier one level, people will be okay. But I think once people realize like they're frustrated, it's not solving their problem, they're going to want to talk to people immediately. And so the people behind that second layer, that curtain, what I expect, Justin, is that they are going to be better than the tier two people that exist today, because that tier one has reset the expectation of what tier two should be, you know?
I think you're dead on. And just to take it a step back, I started off in physical security as a locksmith. I started cracking safes to the Department of Defense when I was 20. Uh, Locksmith is one of the last smiths in existence and is barely there. And Asa Abloy has rebranded and tried to rebrand the entire industry to get them to kind of realize that that's not a thing anymore. So let's look at a security guard, and you can even take the use case of the warehousing application case study that I talked about. I think there's going to be a shift. Locksmith still exists. Door security expert. I can't remember the name of that Asa Abloy coin kind of there. It doesn't matter. But instead of a security guard, we have a safety specialist or strategist. right? So I think we have to accept the evolution that's going to be happening. So instead of guards, we've got safety strategists. Instead of chief information security officer, maybe we don't need that anymore. But maybe we do. But maybe it's just something different because it's so much more than just information security, especially when we talk about the pendulation of cybersecurity and physical security and how those things are just becoming married more and more and more. And one directly impacts the other and vice versa. So I think we just need to lose kind of expectations, definitely be open to change because this is gonna change, everything. And that's not a scare tactic. I think that's the one thing that's true that's in the news about AI is that most everything that we know is going to change in 5, 10 years. And I don't have a vivid enough imagination. I'll ask AI what they think. I don't know. I don't have a good answer for that.
Yeah. No, it's good. I think it's a good perspective you have, and I agree with you. There's a balance, right? I think, I just had a meeting this morning, and there's somewhere everybody's going to fall somewhere between the hype to the hesitation, somewhere in there. And I think that how they answer this question that you had a very difficult question for, and I think you answered it great, is going to show how their answer is. But I think one of the things that a lot of people, when they think about one of the reasons why I left my full time job is because I knew over the next 5 years, I knew in my gut that over the next 5 years is going to be insane in AI. And I was like, not going to be a part of that. Like, if I saw another panel talking about that mobile credentials is like the next big trend or cloud or why are people still using procs, I would have shot myself in the face because I was like, I'm not getting better, right? And so it's no offense to anyone, right? But I think the point is people don't rise to low expectations. And if we're talking about the same thing we talked about 3, 4, 5 years ago, what else is that but having low expectations of ourselves? And when I saw AI how fast it was going, I was like, this is insane, man. And it's getting faster and faster all the time. But when I think about the human traits, getting back to the question of what will remain in the security industry, I think a lot of that will depend on how technology evolves around us and how people deal with that evolution. So we talked about earlier, I think we talked about earlier, how people will evolve. They've always evolved. There's jobs that didn't exist 100 years ago that people couldn't imagine them not existing today. And I think that people will figure it out. I'm super hopeful of that. But I think we think specifically in the industry, especially for the security operators, the technology I think is going to have the biggest impact on them. Based on how the manufacturers make, on what they're willing to automate, what they can't automate. You look at even, I don't think it's far fetched, but the humanoid robotics space right now is pretty insane. There's
I
certainly an
was
aspect of that that's
thinking
going to
about
have some impact
robotics
on
as
us.
you were talking, and I was like, let's not go down that rabbit hole today because it's a whole other
Whole different thing.
that's capable there. Another
Yeah.
interesting use case,
Yeah.
I think, is in loss prevention in
Yes.
big retail. They don't need somebody to put themselves in harm's risk, anyways. They don't need to go after somebody who's stealing anymore. They build the case. The AI recognizes every time they come back in there and steal again, which couldn't even be prosecuted in certain states until they hit $1,000 worth of goods. Once you take the data out of the cash register system, the POS, you've got this case built over a 30-day period of the same person stealing. They hit the magic number, it builds the case, it sends it to the police station, and it goes out on social media. I mean, like, it's getting better, and being
Now,
able
does that exist today, or is that what you think will happen 5 years?
that exists today.
Okay.
Case building, facial recognition as we traverse the legalities of that, and then what to do with that information. And there's another software that we use that's the largest database of retail thieves in the world. It's bigger than what the police even have in their database, identifying who they are, where they've lived, where they've stolen from. And this cloud database is building and building and building, and you can send them a footage, or you can license their software on your cameras to cross-reference things and just build cases immediately and blacklist people immediately if they, if something happens. So I mean, I'm not smart enough to answer that question fully that you'd asked, and I'm just excited to be a part of it. And I think what's exciting is that people like you and a lot of people we've met over the last couple of years, we are the ones that are defining the landscape. Period. Really, we're having these talks at tables with the people developing the equipment, the hardware, the software, the operation side of things behind it, both on the customer facing, my operations. Um, so I have no idea where we're going to be guiding this ship and where we're going to get taken with it. But I'm excited. And then it's, you talk about the ethics of AI. It's exciting one thing that we always say, whether you're a vendor, a customer, or an employee, we're not going to partner with you if our eulogy values don't align. Resume values are great, but this really speaks for the importance of vetting who you're partnering with, whether you're a customer or a vendor or an employer or an employee, and do those values align? Because there's certainly a lot of nefarious ways that this stuff can get used. But it's just cool to see people like yourself at the helm of it, just trying to solve problems.
Yeah, man, I appreciate that. And it kind of talks about, as we wrap up, what you took us right where we needed to go was measuring success in all of this, in this augmented intelligence, and how people think about, are they on the right track? Not necessarily are they winning right now. They could probably make that determination pretty easy, and this is all, subjective, right? What we're talking about, and self-reflection, the self reflect is the self-correct we talked about earlier. But as the world moves on, as this 5 years that you helped paint with us today carries through, I agree. I mean, I think big tech is going to have the biggest influence, and we will kind of just go with that because they have way more money and resources. But you're right. I think we still have a chokehold on where this ends up to the consumer within the security industry. The manufacturers have some control over that. You've got panels, AI boards that are in the space that have an influence on that. Great security integrators like yourself that grow 900% have an influence on that, right? And so I think that continuing the community conversation is a big deal. And as we figure out what's important to people. So, Justin, man, thanks. This has been awesome. I really appreciate the time, and looking forward to letting the audience hear more about what you had to say today.
I appreciate it very much. Let's keeping it human. I know that's just awesome. It's exciting. Thank you.
We called it not artificial intelligence, but
Augmented intelligence.
that's right. That's right.
Drop.